Welcome to I Change the Narrative, a podcast for and about Black men inspiring, supporting, and empowering Black men and Black boys. Today's topic is reimagining and reimaging the teaching profession. And in those starring roles are Black male teachers. Before we start the conversation, I want our guest to briefly tell us about yourself and the work that you're involved in that lends itself to the topic or the lived experience. First, I would like to start with Gerald. Thank you, Gerald.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am Gerald Dessis. I am a teacher in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, finishing my 10th year in the classroom where I've taught English education. And for the past 5 years, I've taught social justice at an independent school as well as a charter school. And that curriculum is now being taught in 14 schools across the Philadelphia area. And this summer, I'm transitioning into a new role as Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Philadelphia School, which is an independent school that focuses on social justice education and project-based learning.
Congratulations. Welcome.
Thank you.
Quan.
Hey, my name is Quan Nellums, educator in Detroit Public Schools Community District. 18 years in the profession, 15 years as a classroom teacher, social study. It's my 3rd year as a school counselor. I also run an initiative known as I Am in Demand. Simply, we connect Black men with opportunities to become mentors, volunteers, and educators within schools in the city of Detroit.
Thank you. Curtis.
Good afternoon. Curtis Valentine, founder and president of Real Men Teach, a national campaign to recruit and retain male educators of color through reimaging and reinvesting in them. I'm someone over my career who's really dedicated my time to systematic change. Currently, I sit on the Board of Education where I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, the 20th largest district in the country. I'm in my 3rd term where the idea for Real Men Teach originated. I also teach education policy at the University of Maryland College Park. But in my day job, I actually run a project called Reinventing America's Schools, which again is a national project based out of Washington, D.C., but works with school districts around the country to create school systems and school policies that ensure every child has an adequate education.
Thank you. Edmund.
Good afternoon, y'all. Edmund Ajapong. I am a professor at City Hall University, where I support and train pre-service educators before they get into the classroom. I conduct research. My research really revolves around hip hop and education, but also finding innovative practices to engage Black and brown youth in STEM. Former science educator in the Bronx. I taught science for 5 years in the Bronx, and I'm in classrooms, often coaching and supporting teachers and school leaders. And I run the Science Genius program, which is a program that we get students to write science raps and bars and spoken word poems just to show them to see the brilliance and beauty of science for young and Black and brown youth. Amazing opportunities. Thanks for having me.
Wow. Such a healthy resume is on this panel today. Thank you, gentlemen. We are waiting for Sam Buckley, but he will be here shortly. So we're going to get started. Black male students benefit greatly from the guidance and mentorship of Black male teachers, but Black men account for only 2% of all teachers in American public schools. And how does that affect Black male students in their K through 12 academic journeys? We're always talking about our Black boys. However, if we care about the fate and future of young Black boys, it is imperative that Black male teachers are sought after. So without the presence of Black male teachers, where does this leave our boys? Well, it leaves them underrepresented, misunderstood, and underprepared. So, gentlemen, my first question to you is, why are Black male teachers important to young Black boys? Anyone can take it.
I'll start. I think that 2% gets thrown out a lot. And I think something that could be a pro or a con, depending on who you are. Some men may see that 2% and say, you know what? When I go into the teaching profession, I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be isolated, as I was when I first became a language arts teacher here in Prince George's County. But in many cases, there are concentrations of Black male educators in certain schools and certain districts that really prioritize the profession, and certain school leaders that are really intentional about recruitment, but more importantly about retention, which is creating a community, ensuring you creating an enabling environment for these men to be their authentic self. And I love what Edmund is doing, this idea that do you want a Black male teacher or do you want Curtis Valentine? There's a difference. You can sort of recruit for race and gender, but not create the environment where men like the four of us feel comfortable to bring our authentic selves. And then I'll say this, I'm a father of a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. Children can tell really quickly when you are being yourself and when you're not. And so I think it's important that we don't just kind of talk about, Black male teachers for the sake of that, but that we create the environment that when they do come in, that environment is embracing. Because I'm fearful that we'll kind of have this movement around trying to get numbers and sort of guilt people into coming into the profession, but yet there's an opportunity for us to really create community, create opportunity for those to say, you know what, here's an opportunity for you to be your authentic self, and one that's going to be embracing of you, who you are, and your students are going to want to go into the profession because of what they see in front of them in the classroom.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
I think the data, always tells us that, over and over again, our children who have access to Black male educators have lower or experience lower dropout rates, lower disciplinary infractions, higher achievement scores on benchmarks. Curtis brings up a good point. If we're going to have Black male educators in schools, we need to make sure those schools are safe enough for us to be brave and show up fully as ourselves. Because when we don't have that freedom to be creative, to bring our full work into this space, then oftentimes we leave the classroom or we seek other places. And I think that does more damage to our students, just as much as us not being there.
Absolutely. Welcome, Sam. I was just presenting the panel with the question, why are Black male teachers important to young Black boys? So feel free to join in on that question.
Sure. So first and foremost, good afternoon, everyone. So, I can speak from personal experience. In elementary school, I had two male educators who were essentially the extension of my grandfather and my father at home. So they understood us. And, right now it's like less than 2% of the teaching workforce are Black males. And there was a study that stated that, if a student is able to, is lucky enough to have a Black male in elementary school, the statistics show that they're more likely to go to college and things of that nature. So I think it's very important that students are able to see themselves, in their educator. And it's just essential, because when you talk about empathy and you talk about skills that are learned past the pedagogy, those, it's just so essential.
Can I add one more thing? And I think this conversation has to grow in that this conversation around Black male educators can't be solely seen as a benefit to particularly Black male students. Mm-hmm. White students, Asian students, Latino students all benefit from a Black male educator. And so if it's just the five of us brothers and Al like yourself, really giving us a platform to do it, and we are the ones, really pushing for this, I don't know how much progress we'll make overall, but we have to see this collectively. Parents of all children have to say, having an educator with the unique life experiences of the five men you see here in front of your child is a benefit to your child, to your community, to your school, to your environment. And so I just want us to be mindful that as we have these conversations, that the onus just can't be on us. And historically Black colleges, I'm a Morehouse man, and so I dig that as well. But we have to also push of others to see the benefit and the value of the lived experience that my brother, Gerald's talking about, but also just, our expertise, what we bring, the flavor that we bring to teaching that Edmund is doing with Hip Hop Ed and other groups like that is saying, hey, I teach at the University of Maryland. Again, I teach mostly white students at a and so, but my students come to my class, you know, when you open that, when you log in, you may hear DMX, you may hear Righteous Teachers, you may hear that walking in, and I'm like, this is me. And whether they want to go into teaching is going to be a function of Curtis Valentine being his authentic self. Whether I'm a Black, white, Asian, or, you know, from any sexual orientation, we have to leave spaces for everybody to grow this conversation.
Also, I think as we grow the conversation to, you know, as we are changing the narrative, oftentimes in many circles, whether it's said or if it's implied, you know, Black men are considered to be the problem. And so in this situation, you know, Black men can see themselves as being an answer. And that helps to change the narrative. In fact, it helps, you know, just from my own personal experience, it helps a man to find purpose. I was a 18-year-old freshman in college, and I was merely volunteering at a local school, middle school. Right. And you know, my mind was blown just how you know, the community. I really had a chance to see firsthand the community and school relationship as it should be, right? And so I was sold. I was, you know, I looked at it. You know, I saw it was a particularly very strong Black male teacher who I volunteered in his class quite a bit. And, you know, being able to see those kids in school and seeing them in the community, you know, it definitely gave me a sense of purpose. And so, you know, I started off in material science engineering in college, and I switched my major to education just because of my experiences as a volunteer. Wow. And so I think not only does it benefit, you know, students and school systems, but it also benefits men as well. You know, being able to change that narrative by being an answer to a school, a community, you know, adding that purpose to your life.
Yeah. And just,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think at that point, we got to think about systems and structures, right? And how conducive they are for Black men and how welcoming they are for Black men, right? Mm-hmm. I think, you know, creating spaces within schools and educational spaces for Black men to be their authentic self without reprimand, without any consequence, right? Because oftentimes, you know, like Curtis, you know, I play hip hop music in my class too, and that's who I am, and that's my space. But then certain spaces, certain universities, certain schools across the country may not necessarily want that or allow that, right? Yeah. So we want to be thoughtful about the conversation about, you know, creating spaces for Black men in schools and having representation for all students and experiences with Black male teachers. We have to really address that on a systemic level as well and create spaces and systems that are more conducive, right? Because if Black boys who are in schools right now are not comfortable, are not seen, are not allowed to be their authentic selves, why would they want to come back and pursue this career, right? Why would they want to live and pursue a professional career for the rest of their lives where they experience oppression, right? And they face that within school systems. So it's really up to us to really push systems and bounds to allow us to be authentic selves everywhere.
And what we got Real Men Teachers, I've actually tried to redefine the word teach. And it may be counterintuitive, right? People are saying, hey, Kurt, man, you know, I can't wear one of your Real Men Teach hoodies because I'm not a teacher. I said, hold on, bro. Think of the best lesson you ever learned in your life. Was it in the classroom or was it in a barbershop? You know, on the street corner, in front of the bodega, at church, on a basketball court, on a football field. Right. So this idea that one of the best mentor programs in my district is called Men of Amate. I went to the program. They have 70, 80 brothers meet once a month. I went in, I met the coordinator. He was there suit and tied up. Met him, cool. Man, this program really dope. I came back the next week looking for him. I come to find out he's a security guard. I didn't know that. Wow. Because in that space, he was an educator and he walked around the school with that respect. And I think we have to look at Black men, teachers, educators in quotation, as an ecosystem. When those students get in that bus, that first person they see in the morning, good to see you, you know, have a great day. You are amazing. The ancestors are pushing for you. When you get in that classroom, the first person you see open that door, that security guard, that paraprofessional, every single man in that building to me is an educator, the coach, the janitor. Everybody has to pour in because I don't student differentiate the way we do. Just like, you know, who gives homework versus who is going to affirm me? Who is going to give me the jewels I need to be successful? And so we redefine that through our Real Men Teach 100 campaign is we're going to put all the men out there who are part of this system, who are allied in this ecosystem of we stand guard, we protect you, we affirm you, we hold you accountable at the same time. but you can lean on us because we are accountable as well.
And I think, that's important as we widen the net. And as you said, Curtis, to what teacher means is that, every Black man has an opportunity, and I would go forward to say a responsibility to reach back to the next generation, to pour into the next generation. Education is schools are, of course, that's the easy button because that's where all our kids are, but with I Am in Demand, we cast the net for we say educators, mentors, and volunteers, because we know that like you said, that if we're able to activate men in places like schools, but like you say, at the barbershop, where it becomes a cultural thing, like the culture is, the lifestyle is that we're reaching back for the youth, and I think that, that narrative is very important as well, that everyone has the opportunity. So whether you the security guard, whether you the barber, whether you, and honestly, I've worked with programs where they use felons. Like I know there's some laws about felons interacting with students, but that still doesn't mean, like, when you add that volunteer point on, like there's been situations where felons would come in and paint schools, paint classrooms, and it's on a weekend with no students there, but they're still having an opportunity to pour back and make the life of young people better.
Right. So and I totally agree with everything you guys were saying. As a school administrator, I had the opportunity to work in an all-rural district where at that point I was the only African-American male administrator in the whole school district on the high school level. And it was important for me to change the narrative from the perspective of the parents. I think for the most part, for the parents and the teaching staff, for the most part, the students, because we're all kind of in that hip hop generation, and they've assimilated to our culture and adopted our culture and things like that. But it was important for me to gain for the parents and the people in that community to see me differently from what they saw on the TV. So it wasn't like, oh, Mr. Buckley, what's going on in Baltimore? It's all these homicides and murders and things like that. But the thing is, when they saw me, they saw greatness, so it was important for me to do that. In addition, everywhere that I've been an administrator, I'm also an adjunct professor at Morgan State. It's important for me to recruit students from HBCUs, to districts. And also, as far as that retention, for them to stay. So, I try to, reach out to all the local HBCUs to recruit educators, so they can give they always come with a different perspective on education. And a lot of times they don't necessarily have degrees in education, but for me, as long as you have that passion, I can teach you how to teach, but it's those other things that come with being an educator. So that's my contribution. So I always try to reach back in, whether it's through PDS schools or partnerships or just recruiting students from the local universities. That's my way of reaching back.
That's awesome. So I know there's some administrators listening. There's some other people that work for different districts who are in leadership roles, upper leadership roles. Why is retention and recruiting of Black male teachers so low?
So I can speak on that. So it's all about, so far it's the partnerships, the professional development schools that the districts, they have, MOUs with. So, there have been opportunities where as though I was able to bring on, a Morgan State or Coppin State or HBCU network and bring that to the staff and offices. I was also able to do some recruiting for multiple school districts. Because, essentially, historically, it's the partnerships with the Towsons and the Loyolas and the Stevenson universities. And, those are predominantly PWI schools. So it's important to establish that relationship, but also, as a person that's been an administrator and a recruiter, it's important that when I show up to those schools to recruit, I let the students know that, you can't come in, half-assed it. for us, we always got to be 2 times better, so for me, it's always, hey, when you come in, you come into the school building, suit and tie and all that good stuff, but just presenting yourself and then showing up on time and showing up as your best is equally important. So, just trying to teach a lot of the undergrads, just showing up in a presentable manner. And, because, you're going to show up into a lot of these buildings where the cultural biases is just going to kick in from the other staff, Black male or Black female, whatever the case may be. So they got to make sure that they show up in a respectable manner. But it's those skills that for me, it's my responsibility. If they didn't learn at the university level, it's nobody ever taught them. It's on me to do that. But I think establishing those partnerships with HR and staffing with the local HBCUs is important.
Yeah, to that point, Sam, I agree with that, and I also want to recognize again, like what I said about, systems and structures earlier. Like I'm a suit and tie guy myself, right? But then, we always tiptoe and dance around respectability politics, especially when we're institutions as Black men. We know we got to be 2 times better, 3 times better, and I totally get that, right? And for me, I just want to be like the reason why we don't retain and recruit Black men, because who wants to play that tiptoe and tip-tap dance, right? Who wants to engage in respectability politics? Teaching, our society does not support and privilege teachers, right? We've seen this past year in the pandemic and the back and forth, and so like teaching is not really a profession where it's not an attractive profession for a lot of Black men unless they're super dedicated and committed to their community, right? Which a lot of us are. But we talk about retention, recruitment. Like we got to think about systems and structures that are going to support Black men, create community Black men, and literally pay Black men, right? Like I always tell folks, I work with school districts, I'm like, yo, if you're really thoughtful and you want to have an intention around recruiting and retaining Black men, pay them more, right? Like put your money where your mouth is. Because of a Black man, I'm a science educator, right? If I graduate with a degree in biochemistry, I can go into the field and I can work in medicine, right? I can work in the science field itself in spaces where I'm making more money than teachers, right? So what is it? I'm not saying we have to bribe Black males to be teachers, but we have to compensate them, right? Especially because of the deficit that's there, right? So if we're really thinking about equity, right, and we're thinking about creating these experiences for our young students, as everyone will benefit from having Black men in schools, we have to think from a systemic space and how are we going to compensate them.
Now, are you talking about incentives for Black men?
Absolutely. I think that's one way, right? I think incentives specific for Black men, Black male teachers, will support that retention and recruitment, right? Because we have to, as a system, as systems and structures, we have to demonstrate what are we willing to give Black men to bring them to the table, right? And how are we gonna convince them and engage them to want to be a part of this, this thing called education that we're trying to push and pursue.
And when you've presented that idea, what was the feedback?
Well, the feedback always is many times, right? We don't got in a budget, or there's this and there's that. But, the programs are great, right? The support systems are necessary, right? And that's great. But, I think if we really want to be thoughtful and we want to see this shift in our lifetime, in the coming years, we have to be really more innovative, right? Like if you want to, if you're at a top tier institution and you want to recruit somebody, you show them a competitive salary package, right? So if we're thinking about the same thing, bringing that same mindset into schools. And I know this is not something that we do in schools. Like, most public schools, they have common salary, and I understand the system structures around that. But my point is that if we want to increase that 2% of Black men, male educators across our nation, I think that's one approach that we can take.
I want to be careful about, again, we talk about narratives, but we also be careful about the narrative we push. And so when I started looking at this, someone kind of reminded me, says, Curtis, what is the retention of Black men in other fields, in other professions? It's hard there are other professions that struggle to retain Black men, and it's not just education. And so I think, again, when we push those narratives, again, when you're saying 2%, you can't keep Black men, you're not going to find the average Black man running into a situation where you're telling me brothers are leaving. And so I think that's something I want to be careful, because other professions are also trying to have these same conversations. Technology, Silicon Valley, law firms, medicine, higher ed, they're all trying. How do we, University of Maryland, Seton Hall, I'm one of the only Black male professors at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. Students recruited me to come. They were like, you don't go through 4 years at a Black institution having a Black male educator. And so this is something that we need to talk about. At the same time, think about reimaging. Think about your idea of a Black male educator. Close your eyes and think about it. What does that person look like? That person like a pocket protector, they have to tie with the short sleeve shirt, or are they bringing the authentic self? Are they bringing the swag that you want to be like them? And look at this. So this idea of being able to wear a hoodie to work was a narrative pushed by millionaire inventors in Silicon Valley to say, I could wear a hoodie to work, but the money's on the table. You either gonna come or not. I'm coming in a hoodie, whether you come in a suit or not. And they changed that whole thing. So now you can go into a meeting with Jay-Z or Puff Daddy and come with a hoodie. And if you're talking that business, all the other stuff is moot. But I think we have to, we could do the same thing if, again, our own community, because nothing worse than coming into a meeting and have your own people look at you like, bro, man, you ain't come presented, bro. But I'm coming. Can we talk about what we're going to come talk about, bro? And then after the meeting, tell me whether you think that what I have on is going to determine whether we get this business done.
Right.
And so I think we have to have those conversations, not only with outside of our communities, but within our communities about the narrative we perpetuate, but more importantly, envisioning for young people what it means to be a professional educator, because we have to, this re-imaging thing that Real Men Teach and others are trying to do is, how do you re-image to a young person about a profession that to them, black man, white woman, black woman, has done nothing but destroy them, tell them they weren't good enough, tell them pull your pants up, take your hat off, saying your mama wasn't nothing, what community you from, you want free and reduced lunch. All those things go into their head. And so even when they go into profession, they try this out and they figure out so this idea of like how to retain, again, a strong school leader is going to retain an educator. So for me, at the top, I know pay is important, but that strong leader is going to give that person, them everything he needs, which is not only just teaching in the classroom, but oftentimes folks who like coach after school programs, teach chess, debate, those are also retention opportunities, because now I could bring again my gift to, and then you have that level of dependability on students saying, hey, Mr. Valentine, when is our next chess tournament? When's our next so-and-so game? And so it's harder to leave that environment where people are counting on you and you can be your authentic self. And so to me, I don't want to go through a litany of things about retention, but I want to say all professors are trying to figure this out, but I think we'll all agree across the board that strong leader supervisor is going to be, to me, the sharpest and the straightest line to retention.
Yeah, and Curtis, you just hit on one thing about showing up as your authentic self. So, for me, always look at it as like, let me have a seat at the table first. So, I got to present myself with my suit and tie so I can have a seat at the table. Then after that, they know, the kids love it. Mr. Buckley, he rocking his J's every Friday. You know what I'm saying? So, because that's what it is. And when I bring brothers in, and like I said, they might not even have a teaching background, but I can teach them how to teach. But they come in with so many other things, whether it's coaching or whatever the case may be. So then they can be, a part of the school community. But at the same time, I make sure that whatever they need, I got them. Because here's the thing, they're going to tell the next brother in undergrad, like, look, go work for Mr. Buckley. He got you. He's going to look out for you. So it's important that, you got the Mr. Buckleys and people that I look up to so I can have a seat at the table. So I think, as more brothers going to, this is year 15 for me in K-12 education. So, for me, it's all about now helping the other brothers, when I got my students in undergrad that majored in whatever, and they're like, man, Mr. Buckley, I'm like, what's your plan after college? You got a job lined up. If you don't, you can go into teaching. And for me, it's like, I can get you to the conditional certification and all that type of stuff, but the thing is for me to have a seat at the table so I can bring the next man up. So, so then once they get in the door, they can be their authentic self. Because here's the thing, like you touched on before, kids can tell when educators have a vested interest in them. Because, all the brothers and sisters that I've brought up, it's those little bit of intangible things that come with, they're not the traditional teacher. So for me, I'm not the traditional administrator. I'm building 21st century educators that got a little bit of swag in them. So, yeah.
Curtis, I know you have to leave, but can you tell listeners how they can get in touch with you for those that are interested, that are in the area, please?
Please go to realmenteach.com. You can see how to nominate someone for our Real Men Teach 100. You can invest in our campaign to create scholarships to keep men in education. but also to reimage and to put forth images that we know represent the fullness of ourselves. So realmenteach.com. You can follow us on Instagram at, official Real Men Teach, on Twitter at Real Men Teach #2. But, join the movement. Let's control our own narratives. And brothers, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And Sister Williams, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Gerald, I know you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I see that a lot of focus is on college students, probably even high school students. But I wanted to throw out a question really quickly. At like what age did you begin hearing messages around like choosing a career path?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
You hear about you get career day as early as elementary school.
Right.
But I always find it interesting. I think where you're going is that you're surrounded by educators. As a black student, black male student, you're surrounded by educators your whole school career, and you never hear about, hey, you have thought about being a teacher. And like I said, I never was confronted about, hey, you ever thought about being a teacher, until I was 18 and I was volunteering at a school. So.
Yeah, that's a shift I made when I was teaching middle school at Mastery Charter School with Sharif El-Mekki. Started asking myself, as well as other middle school teachers, no matter their race, no matter their gender, to start having conversation with some of our Black boys, right? Like, who's asking our Black boys, cis and trans, to pursue careers in education, right? Who's saying, yo, Tamir, I'm noticing that every time you're explaining your thinking in class, all of your peers are hanging on to every single word.
Yeah.
You make an amazing teacher. Have you thought about that before, right? Like, how often are we providing opportunities for our Black boys, cis and trans, to lead activities in the classroom, or to lead programs or projects, or lead a group discussion, to give them that opportunity to see if they can imagine themselves in this role, right? Programs are needed, systems are needed, like absolutely 100%. But one of our greatest tools or weapons out there is teachers themselves. Right? You don't have to be a Black male educator to recruit other Black male educators, right? Our kids need to see themselves in front of the classroom as well. And then to the piece about retention, yes, we need those systems, we need the incentives, but we also need school leaders who are going to invest in Black male educators, right? If it wasn't for Sharif El-Mekki or Lisa Sun or other school leaders that I've had who took me to the side and said, I don't only see you as an asset to my school community, but I want to invest in you as an educator. I want to invest in you as a person, as a human being. Here's a professional development, or here's this conference opportunity that I want you to speak at. Like, those moments completely changed how I saw myself in the classroom or impacting other youth, right? And so those are those opportunities, or those school leaders that kind of help us build community or see ourselves in a community, specifically when we enter these buildings that are made up of staff and faculty that are predominantly white women, right? Who's investing in us once we get in the door?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think to that point, Gerald, you made me think about, like, when we talk about retention, like, how do schools emphasize Black joy, right? Black boy joy, to be particular, right? I had horrible experiences in schools. I always tell people I never thought of myself being a professor, getting a doctorate in education. Like, why would I do that? I was a turn-up kid in all through middle school and high school, right? But then I realized that when I got to college that I can do it if I wanted to, and that I wanted to support my community, right? And for me, it was personal, right? I'm always the type of person who wants to make some change and has some type of impact. So I'm like, who else better than me than to go teach in schools where I understand the kids' experiences and realities, because I lived that, right? But then for me as an educator, it's really more centered around how do we create space where Black boys just enter a school and just feel like they can be themselves, but they have autonomy, like you're talking about. They can make decisions. They can be creative, right? They're not being penalized and judged every turn, any corner. And then Black boys see themselves and are comfortable in schools generally, right? They will want to come back, right? They'd be like, wow, this is a place that really nurtured me. I really grew, and I want to do the same thing, right? For me, my experience is kind of counter. I did have one Black male educator who was like super phenomenal and dope, who got me to see teaching and learning differently. and got me to like connect hip hop and my love for hip hop to science learning. And that's what it was for me, right? But like, how do we create those experiences, and we can't always depend on Black men in those positions to do that for Black boys and for students in general, right? But how do we also empower and support and train all teachers to do this and create these spaces for Black boys just to be fully actualized within schools?
You know, and then the other issue is that, you know, all across the country, colleges of education are suffering. Right? There's not people enrolling, you know, and so, you know, there has to be some thought on, like, you know, alternatives. Definitely some thought on utilizing, you know, mentors and volunteers from the community. A lot of times in education is the school, the faculty of the school, they're not necessarily embraced as members of the community, you know, and therefore education becomes something that's done to a community instead of something that's done with the community, you know. So, you know, changing all that, you know, definitely getting a hold on like what's going on with, I mean, so this just doesn't become a Black male thing. It becomes a problem with the profession where there's not teachers, you know, enrolling. There's not people enrolling, period, in college education with the hopes of becoming educators.
Wow. So for the person that may want to become a teacher, what are the first steps? Because do you have to go to college to become a teacher per se? Or what is it for your particular district?
So, okay. So in order to become a teacher, so there's multiple ways. First thing, I mean, you do need a bachelor's degree. Each state has their own qualifications as far as getting certified. So, you know, a lot of times when it comes to certain critical shortage areas like math and science and things like that, districts, they will offer, states will offer like a 2-year conditional certification. So you get 2 years to go back to school, and oftentimes the district pays for it to get fully certified. So that's, you know, the alternative route. You know, the general route is you go to school for education. You know, you can do elementary ed, which is pre-K through 6th grade, or you can do, you know, the K through 12 programs, or just the secondary programs, which is 7 through 12. So that's more traditional. But I think that, you know, a lot of these certification tests, you know, you take the praxis and whatever your core content is, but, you know, it's, you got to take praxis 1, which is traditionally probably equivalent to the SATs, pre-SATs, which is reading, writing, and math. And then praxis 2 is your content. So whether you're social studies or science or math, or whatever the case may be. But, you know, sometimes for me, I found some of my best educators went the non-traditional route. You know, they have degrees in whatever, they might have a degree in accounting, and, you know, we made them a math teacher, but they don't have the actual schooling to, you know, how to create a lesson plan and things like that. But, you know, they went the alternative route. So I think we got to look at, you know, not necessarily basing, I'm surprised districts haven't came up with alternative ways for people to get certified other than taking the praxis, because a lot of times, sometimes people are just not good test takers. And that has hindered a lot of great educators from being in a classroom in front of kids, because they can't pass a simple test. They could be biased in a lot of different ways. So I think we got to come up with some alternative ways to get people fully certified, and that will help diversify, you know, our teacher pool.
I do agree with you with that about the testing that takes place. That was a couple, you know, I knew a couple of people that struggled with that issue of the assessment for that assessment. So, and they had to pull out of teaching because of that, and some really good teachers. But they say, and particularly Maryland, you know, if you can't pass this test, then you are considered not a good teacher if you can't pass this basic test. So, Quan, what about you? As far as what are some of the qualifications in your district?
Yeah, so you know, as the crisis of a teacher shortage is looming, the district has, you know, of course, there is the traditional route where you go to a college education, and, you know, but what we're finding is that our district and our state really, the state has sanctioned where you can actually capture those who are like paraprofessionals, those who work in the schools who may not necessarily have a degree yet, or maybe they're working to a degree and the school themselves are developing programs where they can put you on a road to becoming an educator. And so that's like a first step. If you're already working in the school as a paraprofessional, or you're working in a lunchroom or something like that, you already have an inclination towards young people or towards education, or towards students. And so just to go ahead and be like, hey, we will support you on your route to becoming an educator. And so that's what that's one of the newest initiatives that districts in Michigan have been sanctioned to do by the state, and the state is funding it, where we're able to kind of capture those who are again in the schools working, but not necessarily educators, and we've been able to push them to that next level and support them to that next level to become educators.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Sam, to your point around the testing, right? I teach pre-service educators, and I'm in Jersey, and all states are different, but in Jersey, to even enter a education preparation program, you have to obtain a certain score on your SAT or your ACT, right? And systems and structures are so important, right? Because NYC Men Teaches is an amazing program in New York City that supports and recruits and retains Black male teachers, and it's amazing. But there's still that barrier to test there, right? So we want to be thoughtful about, and taking a step back, the SAT, universities are not, universities across the country are saying, we don't need the SAT, you don't have to take it. So we have to be thoughtful and critical with the same folks who are creating these teacher, we have to rethink these teacher cert qualifications and requirements, right? If we also, that's another way to increase the pipeline of Black male teachers, is rethinking these testing requirements to support these Black male educators to get into the spaces where they can actually do this work, get the degrees, and get to the classroom.
Right.
And then also making sure that once we're in the classroom, that we're receiving that continuous professional development and teacher training. It does not stop once you get that first position. We're talking about retention, making sure that we're investing in those educators and continuously supporting them around instructional strategies and development, and how to navigate a cross-racial space.
Yeah. And I think just being very creative on how to recruit. I think about the United States military. I know they, I want to say one of their offices in Chicago, their recruiters utilize video games. They have video game tournaments, utilizing Call of Duty and things like that. And they're like, hey, while you're here playing a military game, let's talk about the military, And so I think that there's a tremendous opportunity. Edmonds has talked about it within the hip hop community. I mean, just by the people that I know, including myself, and Edmund probably could attest to this, every other teacher I know has a background in music or hip hop or something. Either they was ahead, they came of age in the 90s, or they did it themselves. And then even when you talk about those who are in the industry, a lot of them, I think about the guy who did the intro for the Boondocks. He's a teacher, right? The guy who won, what's his name? D Smoke, who just won the competition for, he's a teacher, and so it's even when you think about some of the old school ones, after they left hip hop, they end up going into teaching. So I think there's, some further research that's needed, the link between hip hop and education.
Yeah.
For those of us who came of age in the 90s, hip hop was teaching anyway, right? Those guys were teaching, Chris One called himself the teacher, right? KRS One. So I always imagine before the pandemic, I'm there was a huge Wu-Tang concert that was coming to Detroit. I was like, dang, we need to set up a table and do some recruitment, Sam said, I think those career changers, those second careers have, just personal experience, just from the teachers I know. Some of the ones who stayed the longest in the profession were those who changed careers, So definitely not looking at, just because somebody has gone into another profession doesn't take them out of the recruitment running for hey, you still can get this recruitment stuff too. So So yeah, I think just being very creative because like was said earlier, there's other industries. Curtis said that earlier. There's other industries that are seeing a lack of people entering it, especially Black men, and so they get creative with the recruitment. And so I think that's one thing with us with educators, because I mean just to be honest, education is not if you look at whether it's a cartoon or whether it's a movie or whatever. Teachers are clown. Teachers are not put in a favorable position. They're the ones to get over. They're the ones to play tricks on and stuff like that. And so, to really get in front of that narrative, utilizing creative recruitment techniques, utilizing stories from the classroom, utilizing the teacher that's already in it, them telling their stories about why they're in it and why they chose to stay.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, that is our time. But before we go, tell our listeners how they can connect with you, starting with Sam.
Okay, so a person can connect with me at sambuckley161@gmail.com. Also, you can follow me on Cool Be More Vegan on IG. So that's the way that you can connect with me. Thank you, Ms. Williams, for having me. It's always a pleasure. I appreciate you guys as well. The conversation was great and authentic. So hopefully I can link with you guys as well off of here.
Awesome. Edmund, thank you.
Of course. You guys can connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at King Adjapong, KING, and my personal website at edmundadjapong.com. Feel free to connect.
Gerald.
You can reach me on Twitter or Instagram, LinkedIn at Gerald Dessis, email gdessis@tpschool.org or frontlinesofjustice.com or tpschool.org.
And Quan.
Yeah, you can get us on our website, IamInDemand.com, email info@IamInDemand.com, or you can hit us up on social media. Across social media, Quan Nellums are I Am in Demand.
Thank you so much for allowing me, gentlemen, to showcase your stories, for doing your part in changing the narrative, and lastly, for keeping your commitment by being a part of the conversation. That means a lot. If you've enjoyed the show, please let us know. We would love to shout you out and post your comments. If you or someone you know is changing the narrative, please contact us at ichangethenarrative@gmail.com. We would love to share your story. Meet us here next Saturday at 1:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you all for listening.
But